All of a sudden, this creature stepped out. It looked right at me. I was so scared I could hardly even breathe. I don't know exactly how old I was. It was in November of 1992, and I was on my grandfather's farm in Cheatham County, Tennessee. I'd hunted there all my life, but I'd never been in the woods that far. It was pretty deep into the woods, but we went up there every year from opening day of black powder season, me and three of my friends, for about 5 or 6 years before this actual incident happened. But it was opening week of black powder, and we got there the day before and set up camp at my grandfather's barn. We had a camper that I pulled with my truck, and we had a couple of my buddies would follow us in their trucks with our four-wheelers and all of our equipment. And we set up at his barn that morning and just kind of went out and did some scouting. And my grandfather at that time was 92 years old, but he was in unbelievable health. He didn't look his age or act his age. But I'd asked him, I said, what would be the best place to go this year to get a trophy deer? And I was mainly looking for a trophy, a big rack, as we call it, is a large buck with large antlers. And we killed deer there every year. All my friends did. We all hunted in different sections. We had kind of like a 4-section area, and everybody would be far away from each other and no problem anyone getting shot or injured. So that particular day, my grandfather pointed over. He was standing on his back porch, and he pointed over and he said, "You see that third hollow back there, the hilltop?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "I'd probably go there because nobody's been in there in years that I'm aware of." And my grandfather lived in a very remote area. I mean, he didn't have, his nearest neighbor was probably half a mile or more, maybe even a mile. But and there weren't many homes in his area. It was mostly farms and woods and forest area. So I walked over into that area. I went through his backyard, and he had a gate that went into his field that latched, a latch type gate. And he had cows in that field when it was surrounded with barbed wire. And I crossed through the gate and shut it back and went through about a 200-yard wide sage field where the cattle would roam, and went to the edge of the wood line where there was a barbed wire fence, and crossed that and went up the hill and crossed a couple other hollows till I got to the last hill and went down to the bottom of that hollow. And these hollows are really steep. They're maybe 45-degree angle, and pretty good walk over there, maybe 45 minutes to an hour minimum. And he told me to look for an old house, home place that I would probably just see the tin roof left, and that's where he was actually born. And I'd been there years ago, but by road, a different route. And he said I would probably go there, and I'm sure there's probably the bigger deer would be in that deep. So I got there and I found a tree. I walked around the creek side and found a tree that was on a slant, like 45-degree angle. And I put my climbing stand around it and climbed up in it, and cut a few limbs off, and got it where it would be comfortable for the next day. Came back down, my stand still around the tree and my climber too, and just kind of did a little research, looked around the banks, and there was a creek in front of me that was probably 10 foot wide, about a foot deep of water. It ran all year round, and I crossed that creek, went through it, and up to the other side of the bank, and there was a game trail on top of that bank, maybe a foot or two from the actual edge of the bank, and it went all the way down the bank into the woods and the forest. And there was a big green cane thicket to the left of me, and I'm talking about tall cane, which grows on creeks and riverbanks. It's 12, 15 foot high, and it's real thick. You can't see in it. But I walked across the creek and down the trail, and I went to my right, which was almost in front of my stand from where I would be sitting, about 25 feet up. And I had what was called a drag rag that you put on your boot when you go into the woods to hunt, and you put deer scent on it, and it kind of kills any scent of human as you go into the woods. And I'd had that on my foot, that my boot that morning. And I took it off and I jumped up and grabbed a tree limb and pulled it down and tied it to it and let it go up. And it was probably, 8 foot or a little better off the ground, which would pretty much leave a scent down the hollow area there. And it was real thick in there, except for that one opening in the area that I was looking into. It was pretty much an open spot in the woods. And then I went on back to the camp and where my friends were and hung out with them that evening and went up and told my granddad when he'd get up, wake me up. And he usually got up around 4:30 in the morning and he'd go milk cows and do his regular thing. And he said, I'll get you up. And he came down that morning. I don't know exactly what time it was, 4:30 or 5, and knocked on the camper. And I got up and headed that way. And I went back behind his house and down through the gate, crossed the field, climbed over the first barbed wire fence, and started climbing up the hill. And I think it was about pretty close, halfway up, close to the top, when I heard footsteps in the woods and didn't really know what it was. It was to my left, and shined my flashlight, didn't see anything. Went up a little further and went over that hill, started down the next one. I could still hear footsteps, but they would stop when I would stop, and they were on top of the hill. I'd just come down. I'd shine the light, never seen anything. I was a little alarmed because I thought, well, is somebody else in the woods? Because it sounded like a person walking, but it was. But I couldn't find anybody or see anything, so I continued on, and I could still hear it on and off. And by the time I got to the last hill, I went to the bottom of the hill and I followed the creek around because I wasn't very familiar with that area until I found my climbing stand. And I could still hear something up on the hill move a little bit, and it wasn't moving as much, and it seemed to be going off to the far left. So I kind of thinking, is it a person in here with me? I know my grandfather had nobody else on his farm, and didn't really know what it was. I knew it wasn't cattle in there, but I got up in my stand pretty quick and got on up in the tree and got set and I had binoculars I hung on one limb and a little pack that I had my extra powder horn and shell and bullets in and firing caps, and hung that on another little limb I'd cut off up there next to that tree. And got settled in, and I had a little bar that came up that I could pull up from the bottom of my stand, and it went all the way around me. Had like a camo thing on it that covered my feet, and from about here down, covered that pretty good. And I had blackout under my eyes, and like I always did, and had a hat on. But try to keep concealed as much as you can when you're trying to deer hunt. And I'd pretty much deer hunted all my life, so I sat there for a while, and it was real quiet, super quiet. I did not hear any more noises that morning. The noise over to the left, I'd heard it kind of walk, and it seemed like it was walking further away, but down toward the bottom of my left, and I heard it stop. Somewhere sounded close to deep over into that cane field somewhere. I didn't know. That thing went all the way down the bank, so I don't know how long it really went, but I sat there for a while and just ready for the hunt. And I guess it was about daylight. I started hearing regular animals, squirrels and stuff running around like you normally do when you're hunting. But it was a foggy morning, and that creek had a lot of fog rising off of it. And it also was in the field, which was in the clearing across from where I'd put the drag rag in the tree limb. And it wasn't too long after daylight that maybe 30 minutes or so, I seen 3 deer to my left. I don't know where they came out from, somewhere up in that around that cane thicket area. And they crossed the creek and went up on the other side of the bank and walked down the game trail. There was a big doe, which is a female deer, and two smaller ones with it. And they were just doing like deer do, milling around and looking for acorns and or whatever they could find to eat. There was a big crop of acorns that year, so they were eating acorns around those trees across there. And I watched them for a good 30 to 40 minutes probably. Just watched them walk back and forth and eat and thinking a buck's going to come in any time. And all of a sudden, the bigger female, she was facing to my left, and all of a sudden her ears went up, and I looked at all three of them's ears went up, and one of them was to the right of her, and the other deer was kind of to the left of her, a little bit behind her. And they all three were looking down toward that cane area, and they were just frozen, like they were just staring at something. And I thought, well, here comes a buck. He's fixing to come in. And then all of a sudden, the larger doe took her right foot and kind of pawed like three different times, raised her foot to the ground like she was trying to get something to move over there. And I was watching her very close, thinking, well, the buck's coming in, so I better be ready. And then all of a sudden, she raised her head up and like she was smelling a little bit, but she made a real loud blowing noise like a deer does when they're spooked. And then she turned to the right and ran straight across in front of my path, my straight of view from her and the other ones. And they ran like something had shot at them, like they were scared to death. And that was pretty unusual because deer normally don't do that unless somebody spooked them coming into the woods or shot at them or something. So, but I watched them go completely out of sight down to the right of me till they went deeper into the woods where I couldn't see them. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, here comes the big buck somewhere out of this area over here. That's what I was thinking. And I guess it was maybe, it wasn't long, 5 minutes or so, maybe 10. I started seeing that cane in the middle moving, and it was swaying back and forth. A lot of it would take a pretty large animal to make it sway like it was. And I watched it sway through the middle toward the front when I seen all of a sudden, I'm thinking, well, this is a huge buck because it would take a big animal to move this cane like this. And then all of a sudden, this creature stepped out, and I was just blown away. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and I'd never seen or heard of anything like that around there. And if I wouldn't say I wasn't a believer of Bigfoot, but I surely didn't think they lived in Tennessee. I thought they were either out west in California or Oregon or Washington or British Columbia area mostly. But this thing walked out and took one step and leaped completely across the creek. Excuse me. And landed on the game trail right next to it. Now, by this time, I was just in disbelief. I couldn't even believe what I was seeing. And I kept looking at it and thinking, wow, what is this? And I was I've never been that scared, and I don't scare very easy, but it was actually, I was so scared I could hardly even breathe. And this thing walked down the trail just a little ways and stopped and looked straight ahead of me. And I'm only 60, 70 feet from this thing, and I'm at a 45-degree angle, kind of looking up over it. It looked right at me. It knew where I was at. And by this time, I was just didn't know what to do, really. I had my hand on my gun. It was leaning against the bar in front of me, and I thought, well, I don't know if this thing's going to come across the creek and get me or pull me out of this tree or what. I was probably 25 feet up, but it looked at me. It showed me its teeth, like it gritted them and looked at me. And it had its eyes on me. It didn't take its eyes off of me. And then it let out a growl. Then it turns and it walks a few feet over to where I had that drag rag hanging in the tree, and it reaches up and grabs it, pulls it down, and smells of it. And then it just rips the whole tree limb that it was on out of the tree and just threw it on the ground. Now, this wasn't a massive limb, but it was 3 or 4 inches diameter before it met the tree. Pretty good sized limb, but. And then it came back and it was staring at me again. And by this time, I didn't really know what to do. I didn't know where I should fire or run or what it was going to do, but it did not like me being there. So I was pretty much just frozen, not not having a clear conscience on what to do with this thing. But it looked at me again, and then all of a sudden it let out a scream that I can still feel right now. I've never heard a scream like that before, even on any of the tapes I've heard over those years, or the Sierra sounds. I've never heard that kind of growling type scream that was so loud, and it echoed all down that hollow. And it was looking at me after it did that, and I thought, well, this is it. This thing's crossing the creek. It's going to pull me out of this tree. And I remember having my hand on my 50 caliber black powder rifle, but I didn't think one bullet would take this thing down. And I didn't know what to do. And I was about the point where I was about ready to just jump out of the tree and run. But then it just turned away from where it was standing and walked straight into the woods. It looked back at me one time, and then it just kept walking until I watched it go out a distance between the hardwoods. And by that time, I was just trying to get my composure to figure out what to do. So I lowered the bar in front of me, and I just, instead of climbing down, it would take 15 minutes or so to climb down with a climber and stand. I just jumped and hit the leaves, and I'm on that real steep slope, and I slid all the way down into the creek with my gun above my head. I left all my gear in the tree, and then I just turned to the right, went up the creek bank, and went around the edge of that bank. There was a little ravine there, and I went through it. It wasn't quite as steep going through there until you got to the top of it. And I was running as fast as I ever could run. I kept looking back, and I didn't see it. And after I crossed the top of that first hill, I looked back, didn't see it. And I went on down that hill, and there was an older barbed wire fence in between that, and I just jumped across it. It wasn't very tall, hadn't been used in years, and I started running up the side of that hill about halfway up, and I looked back, and it was standing on the hill I just came down looking at. And I don't know if it was the same one or not, but it was one standing there looking at me. Well, that just frightened me more, so I took off even faster than I had before. And by the time I crossed that hill and made it down to the top of the third hill, I was running so fast down the third hill, continually looking back to see if it was following me or chasing me. And at the bottom of that big barbed wire fence I had to cross, I was running about as fast as I could, and I tried to jump it instead of climb over it. Now, I cleared it, but it caught my pants leg at the bottom next to my boot and ripped it all the way up to my knee and tore a big gash in my leg. And I just kept running across. I ran across that maybe 200-yard field there to my grandfather's gate. I looked behind me, did not see it, and opened the gate and shut the gate real quick and run up to the back part of his yard and up on his porch and opened the back door and went in and shut the door. And I was looking out the window in the door, and I locked the door and looked out the windows in the kitchen and did not see the creature anywhere, and ran into the living area where my grandfather was sitting over in the corner. He had a big wood pot-bellied stove in his living area, and he was sitting to the left in a rocking chair that he sat in all the time. And I went over and sat in the corner of the floor, and I was just trying to catch my breath. I'd run so hard, and my grandfather looked at me, and he never called me by my name. I lived with him for quite a few years, and we were very close, but he said, "Boy, what's wrong with you?" And I couldn't hardly talk. I was out of breath, trying to get my breath. He says, "You look like you seen a ghost. You're white as a ghost." And I said, I finally got my breath and I said, "Yeah, I seen a monster in the woods." And he said, "A monster?" And I said, "Yeah, I've never seen anything like that. I've been up here all my life, and it was a monster in the woods. I thought it was going to kill me." And he said, "Well, what did it look like?" And I told him and described it to him. He goes, "Oh, you seen the wood booger?" And I said, "A wood booger?" I said, "I've never heard of a wood booger. You've never told me about one. And, what is a wood booger?" And he said, "Well, I've seen about four in my lifetime. And I'll be working in the fields, and I'll look up, and one of them will be standing there watching me." And he said, they've never bothered me. I said, "I've heard a lot of them, but I've seen about four in my lifetime." And he said, "I never told you about it because if I did, I was afraid you wouldn't be able to hunt or camp in the woods or spend the night in the hayloft with your friends and do all the things you've done here." He said, you probably interrupted his hunt or got in his territory because they're real territorial." And I was just still shook pretty big, and I kept getting up, looking out the window to make sure this thing wasn't coming, and I never seen it. But he was pretty easygoing about it. It did. I was shocked because I knew my granddad well, but he'd never mentioned anything like that to me. And he said, "Yeah, they've lived around here all my life." And he said they, in the wintertime, when they get hungry and there's not a lot of food, they'll come to the hen house here. And he had a big old chicken house to the left of his house, old log one that he or his family had built years ago. And he said they'll come and get two or three chickens out of the hen house, and they'll leave a little pile of rocks and sticks like they're paying for it, and they'll go on. And I was just in shock. I'd never seen anything like that. Never been that scared in my life. I didn't know I had that kind of fear in me. And my friends were still out hunting, and I sat there with him for a while and tried to calm down as much as I could. He kept reassuring me that they weren't going to bother me. And my friends finally came in, and one of them had a deer, and they had hung it in the tree out there next to the barn, and they were skinning it out. And I went out there with them and tried to be normal, but I couldn't be. And they all looked at me and said, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "I'm okay." And they said, I said, "Y'all got a deer good." And I said, "You guys haven't never seen anything in the woods up here since we've been hunting here all these years, have we?" And Scott says, "What are you talking about?" And I said, "Like a Bigfoot." And they started laughing. "You had too much to drink last night." And I said, "No, I didn't drink anything." And I just kind of let it go from there. I didn't say nothing else about it. But I didn't hunt anymore that week. I hung out with them a little bit in the camper when they were in at night and grilled out with them and everything. But I stayed in the house with my grandfather the next 5 nights and didn't go back into the woods. They did, but I didn't. And that was my last time that I ever hunted there. And I didn't hunt for 7 years, maybe. Had nightmares for probably the first year, nearly every night. And it just lingered on, and for a long time, it was real difficult to get over. It's definitely life changing because, first of all, I didn't think anything like that was in the woods because you're brought up to believe there's not monsters. They're on TV, but they are. They're out there. I've had quite a few encounters over the years. You know, I know there's different type of Bigfoot. I know that for sure. I never seen another one like that one. That was definitely the ugliest, meanest looking one that I've ever witnessed. It looked nothing like the other ones that I've seen. But I actually went to the library because I did back in early '90s. I didn't even have a cell phone. I didn't know anything. I'm not very technical anyway. I don't very rarely even turn a computer on. But I went to the library to try to find a picture because my granddad had called it a wood book. And I actually went to several libraries and looked through books, and I finally did find some pictures. There were like, I think this one book had like 10 different types in it. And actually the number two, it was called the number two wood booger, looked exactly like what I'd seen, except the eyes weren't red. This picture had red eyes, and the one I seen had black eyes, but they weren't red. But everything else was real close. And I actually asked Linda Wood to see if she could come up with some pictures for me. She asked me actually, and she's still trying to come up with something similar. But I've never seen another one like that one. It was completely different. I would have probably never even what little bit of hunting I did after that. I'd mainly done in my truck on my farm or another friend's farm or place, and I would just sit in the truck. I wouldn't go in the woods. I would just sit in the truck and wait for them to come out on the edge of the wood line or something. But it pretty much stopped me from hunting because I know if there was one out there, there's more, and I wasn't looking to run into them again. Not one like that one anyway.
See those, and how did you come about seeing another Bigfoot?
Well, my second encounter was pure accident. I was not looking for the creature or any of them, and didn't want to ever see them again. And I fished a lot, and I was, president of a bass club for about 19 years, and did a lot of regular bank fishing and boat fishing. I had a boat, and we had a big club, but I'd been fishing at a spot down on the Cumberland River in Tennessee for years, and it's pretty remote. It's way out. Nobody ever goes to this spot because they wouldn't know how to get in there. But I had some friends. It was a actually water type sewer plant there. It's a huge one, and some friends of mine's family worked there, and I had been there the first time with them, but they didn't fish very often. And you would pull in off this long gravel road and pull in behind the plant. And there was a parking lot there for the employees, and it had a gate that opened up and went back into the woods behind it along the Cumberland River. And I had been fishing there for years. Normally went by myself or with one of my friends, but a lot of my friends didn't like to fish as much as I did. They wanted to go in a boat or they didn't care about going on the bank. My dad went with me some back there, but I hadn't been back there in quite a few years, but I decided to go back there. And I pulled back there and parked my car. It's like I said, it's in a restricted area, but they knew me up there, and I parked my car to the side in the parking lot and put a note in the window and walked back through that gate, and it's probably a couple hundred yards, a little more, back to the way through a real thick wooded area. A lot of, I think some people calls it kazoo. It's like a lot of vines, big, huge vines. It's real thick. You can't see real good. But you go down through that trail through that, and it gets real narrow way on down, and it gets lower. You have to really get down to crawl through it. But I didn't go that far. There's a spot that opened up back there where a creek ran into the river, and I would fish right there. It was a clearing, and I was actually that time I went in there and I brought a bucket of minnows, a styrofoam bucket, and I usually always got 4 or 5 dozen. And that time of year, you could catch a lot of crappie and around that area. And I went up there and set my gear up on the bank, and I was fishing, and I caught a fish. And there's a long sandbar that runs out next to that creek that runs all the way out to about middle of the river. When the water is normal height, you can walk out on that sandbar. But when the water's up, it's over it and you can't get to it. But this day, the water was about normal, and I had caught a fish. And if you don't walk out on the sandbar, you get it hung up in these roots that are sticking out of the bank. You just about have to walk out there. You get your line all tangled. And that's what I did that morning. I had caught a fish and went out to the sandbar and came back up and put it on a stringer, put it in the water, and went back up to I had a 5-gallon bucket that I carried my stuff in, and I used that as my seat, turned it upside down. It was next to a tree, and I went back up and sat on the bucket and reached over to my minnow bucket. My minnow bucket was gone. I couldn't find it. Couldn't imagine what happened to my minnow bucket. I looked all around the bank everywhere, and looked around the stream, thought, well, there's no wind much today. What happened to my minnow bucket? I couldn't find it. I looked around for a good 30 minutes or so. Didn't know what had happened to it. Started thinking, well, somebody's in here and they stole my minnow bucket. But I didn't see any. It's real muddy in there. You can see tracks going down to where I'm at, and didn't see any other tracks besides my own. I didn't know what happened to my bucket, so I just got all my gear and left, and couldn't fish without the bait. So went on back to my vehicle and left, and came back about a week later. I think this was on a Saturday when I came back. Um, Brought another minnow bucket, and same kind of. This second time I came in, though, it rained pretty heavy and the water was up, and you couldn't go where the sandbar was. You had to go all the way down to where the roots were and just reel your fish in there because the water was up too high. And it had been storming that day, and the wind was blowing pretty good on and off. And I've been fishing for a while, and excuse me. And the same thing, I caught a fish and brought it up, and put it on my stringer, and went back, and my minnow bucket was gone again. So I'm starting thinking something is going on here. Well, there's a storm. Maybe the wind is blowing hard. It blew it in the river. And I looked down the river, and of course, a styrofoam bucket's going to float. And I didn't see the bucket anywhere. Couldn't figure out what had happened to it. And I was thinking, was somebody in here playing a joke on me, or what's going on with these minnow buckets? So I pretty much loaded everything up and went back and left again. And stayed on my mind, what could be taking my buckets or who's down there. I only had one friend that knew that area pretty good. My dad knew where it was at, but he wasn't going down there. Nobody else I knew that area, because you wouldn't know it unless you've been back there. So it's pretty remote. It goes way out in the middle of nowhere. And next week, I came back. This time I think I had about a 12, 15 foot long string, kind of a small rope. And I tied it on the handle of the minnow bucket, and I tied it around the tree that my bucket was against. And that way I wasn't going to lose my minnow bucket if something tried to take it, or I would have time to see what it was, or if it tried to blow away, I would be able to find it. And I'd caught a couple fish that morning. The water was back down to normal. I could walk out on the sand. It was a real bright, sunny morning. I remember it really well. Early in the morning, probably 7 o'clock, 7:30, and fishing, doing good, having a good morning catching them. And I think it was about the second or third time I came up and sat down. And I looked, and my minnow bucket was gone, but it was stretched. The rope was stretched from the tree down to that trail, the game trail that went through the thick stuff. It was so thick in there, you almost had to get down on your knees to get through that part of it. I'd never been back in there real far. There's another spot back there, but it's real hard to get to. And I noticed my bucket was stretched, the string was stretched between the tree and the trail going back in there. I looked down that trail and I could see the bucket, and it's real muddy right in the trail area. So I thought, well, there's my bucket. How did that happen? So I got down. I'm 6'5", so I had to get low to get back there to get my bucket. And I was kind of crouched over. I got back to get my bucket, and I noticed the top was pulled off and the water was sloshed out, and it was all sloshed out around my bucket. And I looked down the trail, and I was already back there, and I seen a minnow bucket to the left back there in the vines, or I think it's pronounced kazoo, or however you pronounce that, but it's real thick vines. You can't really see anything past them. But I noticed the minnow bucket landed to the left, and I thought, well, that's strange. There's probably my mother and minnow bucket. And I kind of got down low and went over and picked it up. And then I looked over a little further up to the right, and I could see another minnow bucket laying in the vines and the grass back there. And I said, well, there's my other bucket. So I knew whatever was getting my minnows was coming from back there somewhere. I picked up both buckets and walked back to the minnow bucket that I just brought that day. And I started to pick it up, and I noticed a footprint right next to the minnow bucket that looked like a human footprint. It wasn't large, but who is walking around in February on the on the bank of the river with no shoes? And I looked at it, and I got down and looked at it closer, and I could see another couple tracks going over into that real thick ivy. And I thought, oh no, don't tell me these things are here. I mean, that was my thought. I've run into these creatures again. And I went back to get my bucket and I picked it up and only had one minnow left in it. And I had like 4 or 5 dozen in there. I probably used 3 or 4. And thought it was strange. I only had one minnow, but it only had one. And I brought all 3 buckets out next to the tree, and I sat there for a while looking back in there. I was acting like I was fishing, but I was kind of scared to stay there because I didn't know what this was or if it was another one of these things I'd seen before. But the only conclusion I could come to with a footprint in February was going to be one of those creatures. But it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't like a huge track. It was probably about the size of a little smaller than my foot. And I sat there for a good while, acting like I was fishing. I was mainly just looking down that trail to see if I could see something, what little distance I could see down through there. And it'd been a while, and then all of a sudden I seen one, and it was holding on to a tree, and it wasn't a big one, and it was just going like that, looking at me. It would look at me, and then I'd look, it would go back where I couldn't see it. Well, I got pretty nervous, and I thought, well, it's what I thought it was. I've got with these creatures again, and it looked at me a couple more times, and I got nervous, and I untied my string, got on my gear, and I got out of there. I went back to my vehicle, and I thought about it. It looked nothing like the first one. There was a completely different looking head and everything, and I started thinking about it when I got in my car. I kind of flew out of there because I was kind of frightened at first because I didn't have a very good experience with the first one. But looking back now, the first one could have killed me if it wanted to, and it didn't. So, um, I thought about it for a week or two, thinking, do I want to go back down there again? Do I want to go down there and fish anymore? And I thought to myself, the best way to handle this is you're going to have to get over this fear and you just have to go back in there. And I carried my shotgun. I went back in there. It was probably a couple weeks later. And this particular day, I had no plans of fishing. I was just acting like I was fishing, trying to see these things again. And I set my minnow bucket a little closer to the wood line than I normally did. And I sat there a long time, and then I seen that same. I don't know if it was the same one, but it was awful similar to looking like the same one. It was looking at me this time. It was kind of swinging over, looking at me, and it would go back in. And I watched it quite a bit that day. And then another one came in, and it was behind it, and it was about the same size. Um, the first one looked more female, and the second one, what I could tell, looked like it was probably a male, but these weren't full grown ones. It was 4.5 to 5 foot tall, both of them were. And they were, I guess, juveniles, and I watched them for a while, and they looked at me. They didn't try to harm me, and I sat there for quite a few hours, and that was what we did: look back and forth at each other and watch them. They watched me, and I pretty much did that. And I left, and I felt a little safer about them. They never tried to attack me or tried to be aggressive toward me. And I knew there was more back in there because I could hear them moving around, and I'm sure they were a lot bigger than those. But they're a lot bigger than those. But anyway, I went on out of there and stayed on my mind for a couple of days. I was trying to think what I should do, where I should go back and try to friend them, or I didn't really know anything about gifting at that time. I'd never heard of it, but I didn't really know what to do. But I knew they weren't going to harm me, and it had done a lot to relieve my fear of the woods by running into these, because I really didn't feel very frightened by them after I'd watched them for quite a while. So I started going down there regularly, and like every couple of days, and eventually I started bringing them things. I would bring them different foods, and I made a little wood box. There was a few pieces of plywood and some wood around it, and I actually nailed it in the tree that I was in. It had a branch, and took some nails and nailed it up there where the other animals couldn't get it. And I'd put fruits in there and different things, and went down there, and the little one would come out. And I mean, I was a good ways from the tree, but he would come out after several times, 7 or 8 times probably. He got a little braver, and he would come out and he would get things out of the box and take it into the vines, and they would eat it. I guess they took it away, and that went on for a long time. I become what I call pretty good friends with them, and they trusted me. They could hear my voice. They knew my voice. When I was coming in, I would start saying, "Hey, I'm here today. I'm coming to visit you guys. Hope you're okay. And I'm not here to harm you. Don't harm me." And I would go sit down over there pretty close to the tree, and I would bring some more things to put in the box. And this went on for about probably not late 99 till, well, I mean, early 99 till probably somewhere around 2000, early 2001. And I never seen but three. I seen the two little ones, and I did see another one. And he was probably about 7 foot tall. He would never come all the way out like one of those did. The female's the one that came out a couple of times and got the stuff and took it back in there. And I started to try to communicate with them with that one. And I would say, "My name is Darrell. What is yours?" I did that forever, and they never said anything, or they just looked at me like I was crazy. And that went on for a long time, and I was becoming more friendly with them, and those were beginning to trust me more. And I could hear the other ones back in there. I guess they were bigger ones, but you could hear noises they were making, and I'm sure there was somebody watching these younger ones. I know that's one that's probably about 7 foot tall. He would get down and look at me a couple of times, but I've seen them all three together once, but normally it was just one at a time, and sometimes the two younger ones. But I just become. They started bringing me gifts, and they would bring me rocks and sticks and a Coke bottle, and then one time they made me a milk carton. They didn't make the milk carton, but it was an old half-gallon milk carton that had been in the river. I guess it was at one time red and white, and it was faded out to pink and white. And they had stuck sticks through both sides of it, all around it, that formed like X's. It was pretty cool how they made it, and they had set it in the gifting spot. And I thought that was pretty neat that they had made that for me. And I saved that thing forever. I think I still have it. But anyway, I kept visiting them and taking them things and more food. And I found out their favorite food was jelly-filled donuts. They loved those. That was their favorite. And then cantaloupe. They love cantaloupe. And they really liked cooked bacon, fried cooked bacon. They liked it. That was their favorite meat by far. They did not like a lot of things that I took them. They would take it, but they would bring it back and put it in the box. I didn't see them do it, but you could tell it'd been on the ground. It had stuff all over it. But anyway, that went on, and one day some reason, I thought, well, I've been trying to communicate with these things. I went to the drugstore, dime store, I mean, and I found a little pack. I was trying to think of something to bring them that I could try to communicate. And I bought a little pack of plastic whistles. And they were like little kids' plastic whistles, had a little black string tied through the eye on them. Had a little eye on the top of them. It had a little string that was maybe 5 or 6 inches long. And I brought those in there and hung them in the tree limbs all around the gifting spot. I don't remember how many of them there were, probably 6 or 7. Might have been 10 altogether, because I think I brought 3 more in another time. But I left them there, and I was gone a couple of days, and then when I came in, a couple days after the whistles, it was the craziest thing I ever seen. Like as soon as I walked in and I announced myself, "Hey, I'm here to visit y'all. It's me." And they knew my voice. I would hear whistles, and they were whistling across the river to the left, and they were whistling straight back into where they were at. They were to the right. There was 3 or 4 whistles going off at one time. So these things were intelligent. They knew how to use a whistle, and that was almost like my first form of communication with them. And that went on every time I went in there. They'd blow the whistles, and I heard my voice, and they pretty much accepted me. Um, I was getting closer to them. I felt like I had a real chance to learn some things from them, and them learn from me. Um, but that went on for, like I said, a little over 2 years, and um, it was very disturbing. I went in there. I had to work, and I think it was like a couple weeks before I could get in there. I don't remember exactly what it was. I think the weather was bad too, and I'd went in there. It'd been a couple weeks since I'd been there, and I'd went in there that day. And when I pulled up and parked my car, I noticed it looked different back in there. And I started walking, and this plant where the water discharge or sewer, whatever they did at this exact plant where there was water and sewer, I know it was that type plant. They had been in there with dozers and leveled that whole area where I was gifting them at. It was all torn down. It was kind of graded off. It was mostly just dirt and had a few stakes up like they were about to build something. A lot of the ivy was gone. You can see all back in there. They've been in there clearing it out to build something back there. I don't know exactly at that time what they were going to build, but I got real nervous and I started yelling for them and hollering, and they never answered back. And I even went way back in there, a lot further than I'd ever been, and yelling for them, and I never seen them again. I don't know what happened to them. I don't know if they were harmed or killed or left, or I don't know what happened to them. I've wondered about it for many years.
Have you done other forms of communication or met up with other groups of these?
We had another, over the years, I've spent lots of nights in deep wilderness and different areas of national parks. And so a lot of times with my team, 3 or 4 of us, and other times by myself, I would go in and stay. Pretty regular for a lot of years. I was in the woods nearly every night, and late at night I'd go in because I found out the best time, in my own opinion, to have any type of seeing or any type of interaction seemed to be more at night than it was in the day. And plus, I also had to work and had another job in the daytime too. But I ran into several of them over the years in different spots. I mean, I would see them walking by, no relationship like I had with those, but different encounters. And I guess it was 2017 when I interacted with the next family, and that was in Cheatham County, Tennessee. A friend of mine, Billy Howell, who's in my group, he and myself, we had a friend that lived down in Cheatham County, and he had called us and called Billy, and that he had tried to reach me, but he hadn't been able to get in touch with me. He knew that I knew about these creatures. Everybody around my area knew that knew about them, and I was all the time mainly experiencing, not really researching what they would give to me and I could give to them. So he had his girlfriend lived there, and he drove a truck, and he was going to New York. He would leave on Sunday and get back on Friday afternoon. He'd run one trip, drove a semi truck with a trailer. And his girlfriend stayed in his house there, and she was terrified because some kind of creatures were looking in her windows at night. And he had called me and Billy and said, "Can y'all come down and look around and see what's going on down here?" And we did. We went down there and covered the whole area pretty well. We've seen a lot of tracks. We've seen all the signs that there was a clan or a family of those living there. And we started going down there regularly, and they had a big deck next to their house, and they're out in the country pretty far, and it's a real remote area. It's close to a game reserve. It actually borders a game reserve, and the game reserve, we had found out, had closed down about 300 acres of the back part of that area to hunters for some reason. We never found out why, but that was the area that attached to the property he owned. And we figured it was probably because some hunter probably seen one of them, scared them to death or something, or several hunters had. I don't know what the reason was for sure, but we started seeing plenty of evidence of those. And it was a while. Now, Billy was hunting down there that same fall in a ground blind, and he had a female walk right by him within 5-6 foot from him. And he was kind of scared him a little bit. He immediately told me about it and said, they're in there. He said, I think we're better off going in the daytime or the late evening. So we started going down there regularly, and we had, I guess it was probably the second or third time we were down there late at night. We would go in there before dark and stay till sometimes 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning or later. And we heard a pack of coyotes running to the left of us. There's a big field to the left of this deep woods. It forms like a hump in the woods, and there's a field to the left, and the other side runs to the game reserve. And we had these coyotes running that night. And they were getting closer and closer, and he had a FLIR, which we could see in the dark with that. And I had my flashlight, and I was on one side, and he was on the other, and we would kind of communicate with each other our own way. And these coyotes were running to the left. That was the first night that I personally knew that they were real close. And these things are so intelligent, you can't really trick them because they know when you get out of your vehicle. And I do believe they can read I believe they can read your intentions. They know why you're in there. And I think they've always got a scout. That's what I call them. They have one watching you. They know when you're coming in. They know where you're at. But that particular night, we had been there for 2 or 3 hours when we heard those coyotes to the left, and it was a large pack of them. They were getting closer, and I could see through the FLIR that they were chasing a young deer in that field to the left, and they finally caught up to it and took it down, and it wasn't killed, but it was down. And then all of a sudden, I mean, it was like somebody flipped a light switch. The coyotes all just took off running the other direction they came from, back to where they came from. Got real quiet. You could see the deer down there on the ground. It was still heat censored because it was alive. And then we heard knocks real close, like tree knocks to the left of me and to the right of me. To the left of Billy, he was on the left. I was on the right. I could hear one to the top of the hill, not very far from me. We heard 3 tree knocks that night and one in front of me. And we shined the FLIR, looked in the FLIR down there like just a minute or two later, and the deer was completely gone. So I don't know. We think that one of them ran out of the woods and picked it up and ran back in with it, but can't be 100% sure of that because I didn't see that. But that was when we went down there the next day in the morning. We could see a lot of tracks where that looked like that's what had happened. But we were down there real regular for quite a while, and these things were still staring her to death. And she would put scraps out next to the edge of the wood for the dog to eat, and the dogs got so scared they wouldn't go to the woods. They would go up under the house, and they were pretty terrified. So they started staying inside with her. And I guess it was maybe it was not long after that I seen the first one, and it was a juvenile that walked out and looked right at me. Just looked right at me, stared at me for 30, 40 seconds and turned around and walked right back into the woods. And then we seen the female, and she was a bigger one. Billy also seen it. He also seen the male that he said was about 12 foot tall, adjusting that's based on the height of the deck to where you seen the head looking over it. It was stealing vegetables off the deck they put on their deck, like watermelons and cantaloupes, that type of stuff. And that went on for quite a while, and we started gifting them, and pretty much the same food that I gifted the ones at the river because they seemed to like the same food, and they were eating it, and they were coming in pretty regular at nighttime. They wouldn't come in the daytime, but they came in at nighttime. We stayed day and night quite a few times, but we never had a reaction with them like I did on the ones on the river. And these were similar looking to those, but a little different looking. They were different than the ones on the river, but similar.
You mentioned it several times, Darrell, about the difference in the way they look. Can you describe the difference between that first big guy that you saw and then the ones at the river and then these? What were the differences in their looks?
Well, the first one looked like it's hard to explain because you don't have a picture of a wood booger, but the face is more different looking. The mouth is kind of twisted. Um, the hair around his face is not as much. It's more below the jawline, more hair there. Underneath its eye and around its forehead looked like black leather. The wood booger one that I seen did. It was about 8 foot tall, weighed somewhere between 600 and 800 pounds. I'm thinking, um, really mean looking. I mean, it didn't look friendly at all. The ones on the river look more like the patty type. I've seen in the patty picture. Their heads were a little different. Their whole head was covered with hair under their eyes. All the ones I've seen were black. The ones on the river were black also. They weren't brown. Um, they just looked different. They had a different look about them. Their body looked different. Those looked more bulkier looking than the one I'd seen in my first experience. The one I seen in that first experience was just big. It wasn't like a bodybuilder type. It was just big. But the ones at the river looked more bulky looking, and their head was more different. It wasn't a complete cone shape, but their forehead was different. It didn't look anything like that one. Then the one I seen in the one we seen in Cheatham County was similar to them. The biggest difference between those and the ones that we seen, the one I seen at the river, was their length. They seem to be longer. I don't know how to explain that exactly, but all of them had really long arms, but these arms even seemed like they were longer than the other ones. They seemed more agile, where they could move faster and quicker. If you understand what I'm saying, but they were just a little bit different looking. They were more similar, but not the same. So I don't know how many different types are out there. I've only seen three different. Well, the ones I've seen in the woods that were 100 yards from me walking through the trees, I couldn't tell you exactly what those were.
How far apart were these locations from one another?
Well, the first location that I was at was in County, Tennessee. It's probably 100 miles from the second. The second one, from the second one to the third one, is probably 60 miles, 50, 60 mile probably. I think the third location we was at, I think we were in two clans in there. And the reason why I think that is that was the biggest problem we had seeing them, because we would hear some other ones in the woods and kind of like they were fighting. That's the only way I can say it. They weren't, I mean, like rolling on the ground, but you could hear some loud noises like they were yelling at one another or something in there. And they didn't seem very friendly with other ones that were in there. I think there was probably two different families in there, and one of them tried to encroach on the area we were in because it probably wanted some of the food we had. So I don't think we could come up with, but they're pretty territorial. I've seen so many markers over the years of what they do. They don't want another clan in their area. So, and I do believe the younger ones, I don't know how many was in that clan down there. Our best guess was probably 6 or 7. The other clan, I know at least 2, because they were not very friendly with the other ones in there. They were trying to run them off, I felt like. But And there again, we can't sit and see them. We're only speculating what we think was going on because they're in the woods. We can hear them, but we can't see them always. But they're not going to walk out and just let you look at them unless they're trying to run you out of their area or trying to scare you. And a lot of times they even hide when they're doing that. But those really never tried to bother us down there. They was nowhere near friendly like the ones on the river. I mean, I truly believe I call some of them, I think they're all, I don't think any of them are apes by any means. I think they're a type of people. I think they've been here a long time. I don't know how many. I wish I could communicate with them. I've heard them speak words, but not a sentence. So you could repeat a word numerous times, and I've had them say bye, bye. When we say see y'all later, bye, they bye, and you'd hear that. But I've never heard them. I've had people tell me that they can communicate with the entire sentence, but I've never heard it. So I'm sure other people have had better experiences than I have. But it takes a long time to gain their trust. I know that. You're not going to gain their trust, and they know what you're thinking. If you go in there with a weapon, which we did have a weapon when we first went into that location on the river. I mean that location in Cheatham County. They seen my shotgun on the river, and I didn't take it back again. Just that time I took it in there. I think I took it in there twice, and they didn't. I just didn't take it in. I didn't feel scared of them. These we had a weapon, but it was hidden under our clothes where you couldn't see it, and we never had to use it. But you don't ever know what you're going to run into out there. I would definitely never harm one unless it tried to harm me, because I think their true intent is just to be left alone. They're very skeptical of humans, and probably because through their times they've had plenty of humans try to harm them. Now, there's bad ones like there are people. I had some bad ones out of that clan, but it's the biggest portion of those are they're just trying to live their life and not be bothered. I never really call myself a researcher. I call myself an experiencer, and I haven't been. I was into really big into researching or experiencing for about 24 years after my first sighting. Um, but I haven't researched heavily for Bigfoot since late or early 2021. Mainly now, I'm spending most of my time with my two or three research partners, Barton Nunley and Martin Groves and Billy Howell. So we pretty much get together at least once or sometimes more a month, sometimes two or three times, depending on my situation, because I kind of live in two areas and I travel back and forth for my children. But I've seen many Bigfoot over the years. Lots of encounters actually. Two dogmen since 2021, but that's pretty much what I've seen. I've never seen any aliens or any other type of entities or that type stuff. I hope everybody will check out our group, Bigfoot Believers and Other Creatures. We'd like to have you join us, and also join Inhumanoids by Barton Nunley. He's in my group as an admin and one of my best friends. Martin Groves also. He has a new book out, Beast Between the Rivers. I've been with him his book, his latest book, because he and I do a lot of experiencing and researching together with a dog man. So check out his book. He's also admin in my group, and have a lot of good people in my group.